right, it's KP's Video News. And we coming at you strong. You got to keep it going on. Here we go. Georgia death row inmate who appeals sentence based on racist juror dies in prison. Jackson, Georgia. A Georgia death row inmate who was issued a stay of execution in 2017 based on a trial juror's racist beliefs, including questioning if black people are even have souls, has died. Keith Bo Tharp, 61 years old, died of natural causes, according to the Associated Press. Georgia Department of Corrections officials confirmed that Tharp's death in an email to AP on Sunday. Tharp's legal team at the Georgia Resource Center, which offered free legal help to death row inmates, said that the death was likely due to complications of cancer. Despite his 2017 stay, Tharp had been awarded awaiting possible execution after the U.S. Supreme Court in March 2019 declined to take up his case. The court failure to confront the racism tainting Mr. Tharp's death sentence remains a stain on the judicial system and calls for an increase in efforts to eradicate the poison of racism in our criminal courts, one of Tharp's attorneys, Marshall Witter, said in a statement obtained by CNN. Tharp had been on death row at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison since 1991, when he was convicted of murdering his sister-in-law, Jacqueline Freeman, in Jones County. He was found guilty of malice murder and 2 counts of kidnapping with bodily injury in the September 25, 1990 crime, which stemmed from his wife leaving him the month before. Following various threats of violence made by the defendant to and about his wife and her family, a peace warrant was taken out against him, and the defendant was ordered not to have any contact with his wife or her family. Notwithstanding this order, Tharp called his wife on September 24, 1990, and argued with her, saying if she wanted to play dirty, he would show her what dirty was. The next morning, Tharp's wife and sister-in-law were driving to work when Tharp used his vehicle to block theirs. He got out of his vehicle, armed with a shotgun, and apparently under the influence of drugs, ordered them out of the vehicle. He then took his sister-in-law to the rear of the vehicle where he shot her, the news release said. He rolled her into a ditch, reloaded, and shot her again, killing her. Tharp then drove with his wife. After unsuccessfully trying to rent a motel room, Tharp parked by the side of the road, and said afterwards he drove to Macon, where he ordered his wife to withdraw cash from a credit union. Instead, she called police and Tharp was arrested. His appeals over the following decade, Tharp's attorney argued multiple issues should keep him out of the death chamber. They claimed their client's IQ of 74 indicated he was not able to fully understand the charges against him. They also argued that he received horrifying, uninformed, and unconcerned legal representation at his trial. In 1998, 7 years after his conviction, Tharp's attorney interviewed a white juror, Bernie Gallo of Gray, Georgia, who told them after studying the Bible, he wondered if black people even have souls. Gaddy, who signed off an affidavit filed by Tharp's lawyer, stated that there are 2 kinds of black people in the world, black folks and niggers. Gaddy noted that he understood that some people don't like the N-word, but that's just what they are, and he tells it like he sees it. Gaddy admitted knowing Freeman, the murder victim, and said she came from one of the good black families in Gray. If they had been the type Tharp is, then picking between life and death for Tharp wouldn't have mattered so much. My feeling is, what would be the difference? Court records indicate that Gaddy went on to say that Tharp, who wasn't a good black guy in the good black guy category in his book, should get the electric chair for what he did. He also told the attorneys that some of your jurors voted for death because they felt Tharp should be an example to other blacks who kill blacks, but that wasn't the reason. Tharp's attorney used the affidavit to appeal the case to the Supreme Court, granted a temporary stay of execution in September 2017. That night, Tharp was scheduled to die. Gaddy's remarkable affidavit, which he never retracted, presents a strong factual basis for the argument that Tharp's race affected Gaddy's vote for a death verdict. The court sent the case back to the 11th Court of Appeals for consideration of whether Tharp should be allowed to appeal the sentence. The appeals court in 2018 ruled that he should not, denying the appeal in part because it relied on a decision in a later case that could not be applied retroactively. The Supreme Court in March declined to hear Tharp's appeal of that decision. Justice Sotomayor wrote in a statement, however, that she was profoundly troubled by the underlying facts of this case. To this day, Tharp's racial bias claim that has never been. Anyway, Justice Sotomayor wrote that while she agreed with the court's denial of Tharp's petition, she felt the justices should not look away from the magnitude of the potential injustice that procedural barriers are shielding from judicial review. Tharp was uncovered truly striking evidence for juror bias, Sotomayor wrote. Racist sentiments expressed by a juror entrusted with the vote over Tharp's fate suggested an appalling risk that racial bias swayed Tharp's sentencing. The danger of race determining the criminal punishment is intolerable and endangers public confidence in the law. That risk is especially grave here, where it may have yielded a punishment that is unique in its complete finality. Sotomayor wrote that while it's tempting to excuse the bias in Tharp's case as an outlier, racial bias is a familiar and reoccurring evil. That evil often represents itself far more subtlety than it is here. Yet, Gaddy's statements and the fact that they went unexposed for so long, evading reviews on the merits, amount to an arresting demonstration that racism can and does seep into the jury system. Tharp's attorney said he spent the last few years of his life strengthening his bonds with family and friends and deepening his Christian faith. When facing execution in 2017, he apologized to Freeman's family for her brutal slaying. Tharp recorded the apology in holding cell before his scheduled execution. Like I said, he had got a stay of execution, so he didn't get executed, but he died of natural causes, waiting to try to get an appeal in that case. So it's a possibility he would have just got life if he would have got life in jail, in prison, but to get the death penalty and you had a racist juror on the trial is that's basically absurd. Okay, here we go. This is a crazy, crazy world we living in. As bad as they hate blackface and black folks, a Maryland man disguised himself with blackface while robbing a bank, police said. The suspect walked in the PNC Bank in Perryville, a small town near Delaware, the Delaware border, and robbed the bank by passing a note about 1 p.m. on Tuesday, local police said. The bank robber, who was white, was wearing a white coat, maroon hat, and covered his face with dark paint, authorities said. Police believe he's about 5'5" in his late 20s or early 30s. The suspect is still at large, cops said. So here you got, man in blackface robbed a Maryland bank. Yeah, what do they think of next? And here's another story here. An indigenous woman said she was barred from a WestJet flight in alleged a profiling incident. An indigenous woman said she wants a formal apology after she allegedly being racially profiled and denied service by a WestJet attendant in Victoria, BC. So Nikki Sanchez, a 33-year-old Maya, a Pipil woman, indigenous to Central America and former vice producer, was en route to New York, that's Vice, the TV show, on January 15th, awaiting for the first leg of her trip, a WestJet flight between Victoria and Vancouver. A snowstorm created heavy travel delays, which prevented passengers from flying on schedule. Sanchez asked an attendant for help following the 5-hour travel delay. The attendant refused and said, "You guys can't handle your alcohol, you're a liability," Sanchez told Vice. She took one look at me, did not ask for my name or flight number, and instead she asked if I had been drinking, Sanchez first wrote in an Instagram post. She told the attendant she had consumed 2 drinks during her 5-hour wait and was far from inebriated. According to Sanchez, the attendant then said she never put her on a flight, let alone one of WestJet's. And Sanchez said she tried to reason with the woman by sharing information about her role as a PhD student in the University of Victoria. She also said she was on her way to a high-profile photo shoot in New York celebrating sustainable fashion. She was not at all interested, so Sanchez went back through security and bought a $320 ticket to Vancouver on Air Canada. Air Canada attendant who was so apologetic, he pulled strings to get her on the flight that was already boarding, Sanchez said. By the time Sanchez arrived in Vancouver, she had missed her chance to get to New York in time for a photo shoot. She crashed in Vancouver overnight and returned home the next day when she called WestJet's customer complaints department to report her experience. They said sincere apologies and that they would review the employee, Sanchez said, adding that they were begrudgingly gave her WestJet's credit for her missed flight between Victoria and Vancouver. WestJet also recommended she file a complaint with the Canadian Transportation Safety Board. In a statement device, WestJet spokesman Morgan Bell said the airline has a zero-tolerance policy for racism and discrimination and investigating the situation. WestJet takes sensitivity as well as respect for the workplace training annually. The incident highlights ongoing racism and colonialism in Canada, said Sanchez, who teaches about decolonization for a living and produced Rise, a Vice documentary series about indigenous politics. You only need to scratch beneath the surface to find out how racist the general worldview in Canada is, and that's what's so upsetting for me in this instance, Sanchez says. Regardless of anything I said or did, this woman had already made a decision about who and what I was, and that was the drunken Indian stereotype. So Sanchez was unhappy with WestJet's handling of the situation and decided to take matters into her own hand. She posted about her incidents on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook early Monday morning with the hashtag boycott WestJet, despite knowing that her post would inspire anti-indigenous vitriol online. The goal was to apply pressure to WestJet until the company issues a formal apology and introduces mandatory anti-oppression training for its employees. The comments on Sanchez's original Instagram post pulled up numerous racist reactions. One user accused Sanchez of pulling the race card, while another hurled gender epithets and accused her of being drunk and high. The extent of racism in our society runs so deeply that anytime someone comes forward about experiencing racism, the backlash is ugly and intense, Sanchez wrote online in response to the comments. And so far, WestJet has not issued a formal apology to her, personal apology. So even in Canada, we thought it was bad here in the States. Same things jumping off in Canada, folks. Same old stuff.